So, hi guys. Oh, thank you very much. Hi, I'm blown away by that presentation, so I'm not sure I can top that, but let me try. The talk right there on the screen, transitioning from school to industry as a game designer. Now, that was a very nice presentation of who I was, but yeah, I'm Alex, and I'm the game designer at Eat, Create, Sleep, shout out in the back. And it's a studio here on Gotland. We make this little indie game called Among Ripples, where it's like an ecology management sim thing going on. Check it out, greenlight us on Steam, it'll help our case. But before that, I was a level designer at King, and they make this little indie darling mobile game called Candy Crush. Your mom probably has heard of it. Yeah, it makes absolutely no money at all. But all in all, I have 5 years of professional game development experience, so that's 5 years of being paid to do this thing, so that's nice. And before that, I was, just like many of you, I guess, here, students at a game design school. Although it was a film school, they had a game design program, so not in the wrong industry. So this one's for the students. It's mostly aimed at game design, but I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that I've noticed people go through in their first days at a new job or their first professional position in the gaming industry. So while it will be aimed more at game designers with the more practical things about like, this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be doing, though not too much about that. Many of the like, this is how you survive going through school and then getting into the industry with your sanity somehow intact. Salvageable is what we're aiming for. Let's see. So specifically, what's in this talk, we're going to be going through some personal recounts, my own and some people that I have worked with, and just general good stories, bad stories, good experiences to have heard. What it's like applying for jobs in the gaming industry, what to do while you're applying, what types of companies and what types of positions are nice. Nice. What kind of companies are out there, what your first days might look like on the job when you finally get it, the practices of being a game designer, what you're doing on the job when you finally get it, the industry as a social scene, how you're making friends there, what they're worth, who to look out for, etc. And what usually happens after you've passed through that initial stage of like, oh my God, I got into the job and I had it, and now it's just kind of like what happens after that. Sort of where I'm right now. But my first job, it was as a junior level designer at King. I was working on the Candy Crush Soda Saga, which is like Candy Crush number 2 out of 5, I don't know. But essentially, this thing you're seeing right here, we were making these like 5 to 15 of them a week and just keep grinding them out, make the same ones. 9 by 9 level design, fun. We didn't get a lot of tools to work with either, but we did what we could. But it was a super data-driven like position. Much of my perspective is going to be colored by essentially this job. So what I'm trying to say with this point is that it was a very corporate structure. You had all these big HR departments and accounting and the people that are like analyzing your games, and then you have the maintenance of the game and the servers, and then you have this game development itself. So very huge company, a lot of people. But if it was making a lot of money, I mean, Candy Crush is taking in all of the banks. So it was very safe, very stable. There wasn't a rush to be like, oh, we got to innovate, we got to push out a game, we got to reach the market. No, they already had the market, and it was more about maintaining being on it. So you didn't have to rush a lot when you're doing this job. And finally, I noted down it as being gaming high school, because when I finished university and I got into King, I felt like the workload dropped drastically, which is a nice thing. At university, you know, you're studying, you're working hard, and you're like really cutting your teeth and getting into there. But then you get into the job, and it's just kind of like, oh, you know, do this task repetitively, week by week. Instead, it was more about getting to know the people that you're working with. Kind of like high school, you're kind of finding yourself like, who am I in the industry? So that was my first job. But until I got that sucker, it took me 3 years from graduating the Vancouver Film School, that's the one. So quite a long time before I actually found something that had to do with the gaming industry that would pay me. Meanwhile, I was working on portfolio projects. I was going around industry networking, doing freelance work, never got paid for those. I did a lot of modding, went to a lot of game jams, many work tests, more interviews, and a lot more applications. You just keep churning out, grinding. I mean, like, looking for your first job is gonna be your first job, essentially. My personal life was acting up, you know, you grow up, you go through school, and then suddenly you're not a student anymore, you're not somebody that goes to school, and a lot of things catch up to you at that point. And honestly, after 3 years of trying to find a job and putting in so much work into finding a job, I was just right there to quit and asking my brother to be like, hey, set me up with something else. I need to make some dough. But talking about more practical things than what I've gone through, let's talk about what it looks like when you finally graduated and you're starting to apply to studios and companies around the world. Like I said, it takes a very big chunk of time to get started on applying to different companies. If you want my most practical suggestion is start applying when you're essentially on your way out of school, because you're gonna need to get a lot of things done. You're gonna need to get your website done, make sure it looks like it's made by a designer, make sure your CV is up to date, make sure your portfolio has something in there. And it also takes a lot of practice to just apply. And while you're applying, you know, like if you're a graduate game designer, there's not a lot of positions that you can expect to get, but you shouldn't be that greedy either. Apply for anything you see. You see a QA position, go for it. You see a data analyst position, try. I mean, you see somebody want to work in like bringing the coffee around, go get it. Yeah, exactly. Anything that gets you into a building or in the network that puts you with people that are in the gaming industry is valuable to you. Also, apply despite not meeting requirements. Everything you're gonna look at that has game design is gonna be like 3 years minimum of professional experience, and it's gonna be like, well, how do I get that experience when you won't give me that experience? And the recruitment process is not such that they look at somebody and they go like, oh, this person is perfect. I mean, like we vibe, we click, we can teach them a lot of things. But this one thing didn't fit, so nah, pass. They do make exceptions and bend their own rules. The requirements they put on the application sites is more of a filter than the hard gate you need to pass. So yeah, go for it, show your front feet. Yeah, exactly. You might have something that they specifically want you to be working on. If you have a portfolio piece where you showcase a really cool jumping mechanic, and that's exactly what they're working on this game, they might pick you over somebody that has 10 years of experience but has no feel for that, you know? Lastly, don't lie on your CV, but, you know, LinkedIn language, right? You embellish things a little more than they have to be. Don't lie because you will be caught in that lie, unless you're a terrific liar. But then you should be in sales, not game design.
It's a different job.
Yeah. So, you know, just make yourself look good. If you can take all of your pride and narcissism and just take that monster and put it into a little cage, that's your CV. You know, if you can't be proud of yourself or your CV, it's going to hire you. Anyway, so you've been applying, you've been sending out applications like a machine gun. Everyone's got one, and for every position at every role. Like every recruiter knows your name. They've memorized your CV. They can see it in their sleep. Finally, somebody's going to come back to you and be like, God damn it, fine, here you go. Let's talk to you. That's the first thing you want them to do. And that's when you get into the interview process. And it comes in 3 steps. First of all, they're going to like reply to you and be like, oh, we want to talk to you. Can we set up a phone meeting? And you say, yes, of course. We can't always text. But the phone check-in is just to check if you're a psychopath. They want to go like, oh, hello, yes, I'm Margaret from so-and-so. How are you doing? And you answer, yes, I am a sane person, and I will definitely not murder you in your sleep. And they go, great. I will let my bosses know, and then we can take a look at your CV. And that's when you usually go to the next step. If they do enjoy the fact that you are not a murdering psychopath, then they might send you a work test because they want to know if you are not artisan in the art of butchering and then maybe in the role you're applying for. And we'll talk more about that next slide. But essentially, you make a work test, you send it back, and anything past the work test, if they're still talking to you, it's because they want to check if you fit into their company. So they've seen what you can do, and it might not even be the most impressive work test that they have, but they might feel that you are the fit for the company versus somebody that just nailed that work test. And whenever you meet these people, bring in an artifact. Sorry. So an artifact is essentially something made for their game. I was applying to this studio called Outsiders, and they were working on this game called Project White, which is like you're this first-person monster running around killing Vikings. And when I did have an interview with the studio about my application, I came to them after like studying the trailers that they have of the game and bringing like, hey, this is a level designer position. This is an idea for a level that I've made for your game. Not solicited, not asked for, I'm not expecting anything. You've already seen my work test, but this is to show that I have been thinking about your game. It's not just what you've asked me to do, prove yourself that you are worthy of this position. This is proof that I can take that further and create something for you. And messing up is normal. You get better at it. You're gonna get to your first interview, you're gonna be super nervous, you're gonna be terrible at it, and then you're gonna be like, oh, well, that's as far as I got. But no, keep going because you do get better at interviews. You get less nervous, you get less thirsty for the job, let's say. At some point, you're just going to be like, ah, it's just another interview. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to be myself, blah, 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 get it over with. And then that's the one you usually get because, oh, this looks like a person who has options. But going back to the work test, I'm going to talk for like specifically game designers because I'm not really sure what other crafts do, but yeah. For a game designer, it's usually redesigning an existing feature, so like a tutorial, a game loop, etc. Very cut and dry. You get like instructions. They usually tell you to like download our game, look at the core gameplay loop, and then check out this economy mechanic that's going on here, this reward loop. How would you change that particular thing? And when you do these, like put your best effort into these, but depending on the studio, they might be putting up different time limits as well. So they might be like, we want to see what you can do in 1 month, and we want to see what you can do in 5 days. And they don't expect you to solve all of their problems in a work test either. I mean, you're applying for your first job, and these are professionals, and they're coming to you asking you, like, is this enough? So it's more about how you came to these conclusions that you had. Yeah, time limit is about 1 to 3 weeks, and turn them in even if you fail, because they might see something that you were going for and that might interest them. Also, while you're applying, you should be working on things because it takes a long time to apply. So work on your portfolio, work on your networking, study up more after you're done with university, and look into some side jobs as well. On your portfolio, games are gold, employment is platinum, but that's what we're trying to get, so we already know that. Like I said, make sure a website looks like it was made by some sort of designer. I mean, you should not just be a game designer, you should be an everything designer. Put up your student projects there. Put up levels that you've made and all kinds of like map editors and engines. Things you've made at game jams, put them up there. Mod things with other people. Publish your mods because like, finally on the point, don't put everything up there. Think of it as a showcase. And that's why I'm saying like mod things with other people and publish them. Because if that hits and it's like this super popular mod, then boom, that is gold for your portfolio. Networking. Just running through things here a bit quickly, but networking is never a guarantee for anything. You cannot go outside and meet new people that are in the industry or industry adjacent and be like, hey, can you bring me in, please? It's weird. People don't have that power to just be like, yes, I'm just going to bring in all of my friends, all of my cousins. Where you do your networking, go to the game jams. It's great. They force you into a group of people that all want to be game developers. Great. You can make a game together and you can get to feel who you want to work with as well. It's kind of like an interview for the industry as well. LinkedIn recruiters. When you're freshly graduated, you're not going to hear a lot from LinkedIn recruiters, but you should be reaching out to them. Their job is to talk with industry people all day, so you coming to them is just making their job easier, and they will start including you in their circles. Go to indie meetups. It's a lot more casual, but you're going to be moving around in a lot more circles, kind of like a game jam. If you're looking for professionals, go to company or industry events. Like, hey, they released Vermintide 2, and they're having a big party at this grand hotel, yada yada. That's where you're going to find most industry professionals, because it's basically an after work for them. We're celebrating our game. We're hanging out with our friends. The company's paying us for drinking beer. Yeah, we're there. Look up things online. You never know who you're going to find. That's what I'm talking about modding as well. Getting comfortable when you're networking is also something that you're going to have to skill up quite literally. Kind of like I mentioned with the applications, after you've gotten that initial rush out of like, I really want to be in the industry, and you kind of just, yeah, I'm kind of looking for a job industry, that's when people want to approach you when you don't have that nervous energy. Keep studying, play lots of games. It eases the conversations, but it's totally understandable if you don't have the time to. Nobody has the expectations of being like, oh yeah, so I'm working on this mechanic and it's kind of like the reward system in Terranil, and you say, oh, I haven't played that. And they go like, what? Doesn't happen. We don't have time to play all the games. Mod games and allies, how they change and where they chafe. You know, Skyrim is essentially a modding sandbox at this point. Try making it like an ultra-realistic survival sim or what have you, and see which mods in combination create that feeling that you're looking for, and go like, wow, I can see how Skyrim could be a game like this. And where the... Dang. Nefarious. Are we being attacked? Anyway, I think I can take the attention over that. So anyway, you look at where Skyrim doesn't have the equipment to channel into that fantasy you're trying to go for. And then you start going like, oh, I could make Skyrim better. Study up on your industry and studios. Check out which ones are in your country, in the countries you want to be in, what's happening on the global market, which studio Microsoft bought this week. You know, just keep yourself updated. Tools. I'm not going to go super into these because the design tools aren't very tool specific. It's more about like how you figure things out. But any tool experience is gold, familiarity is silver. Because if you have something on your CV, as a game designer, you can't be like, oh yeah, I'm really good at thinking as my experience. But I can be like, oh yeah, I'm experienced with Perforce as version control. And the company can be like, oh cool, we use Perforce, you'll be a good fit for us. So even if you just know the names, if you know that like, oh, Jira is that kind of thing, oh yeah, I definitely heard about that program. That's the lying on your CV part. While you're applying, just quickly through this, you're essentially gonna have to support yourself at one point if you're still looking for a job 3 years after graduating. So, you know, think of it as the marathon, and this is something that you have to do to keep yourself in the race. If you can get a teaching job after you graduate, get it. It's gold. It keeps you in the industry. It keeps you motivated. It keeps you around people that want the same things as you. Do freelance work, but I mean, like I said, I did three freelance jobs, and I got ripped off every time. Never got paid. Doesn't really matter. I put that stuff on my CV, so I was paid in exposure. And if none of the above, then look for something like out of field. If you have a level design blog that you keep fairly maintained and updated, and it looks like it gets some readers, it is very easy and natural for you to be like, hey, level designer at EA Dice, you mind if I interview you? And boom, you have a connection. So, you know, make yourself useful. Quick summary of it all, but yeah, I think we've heard enough about how to apply right now. So let's talk about your first days instead. And again, this is going to be colored by my perspective from like my first job being at King, but I assume it's translatable, just some things are different. But your first day, you're usually just getting the tour, everyone's showing you where the kitchen is, where the bathroom, where your desk, etc. You're getting your introductions, this is your boss, this is your coworker. You get your onboarding where they go like, we are this kind of company and we're trying to save the world by making the best games ever. Just smile and nod. You finally get to your desk, you get your equipment. This is a good time to ask IT for anything extra, you know, get that extra monitor, get that bouncy ball that strengthens your core, whatever you want to get, especially if you're at a big corporation like King. They got the dough for it. And then they're going to set you up with a bunch of accounts and programs you'll never use. As a game designer, you're not going to be in a lot of like, oh, I need to be in this program and design, but you might be poking around in the project anyway. You might be like, I really need access to the marketing folder to get some material from there so I can put it up in my design documents. So you're kind of being a ghost around there. So you're sitting at your desk, you've had your introductions, and now what? Has anyone told you what to do? Go ahead and do that then, of course. If nobody has told you what to do, your tasks are done, or it's just busy work, feel free to ignore that. I mean, know what's busy work, but if somebody is like, oh yeah, just, you know, arrange your emails and check out these folders or whatever, they're essentially telling you to like, loaf off and don't sweat it. So what you can do then instead is get to know your team on a person-to-person level. You know, go like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Look at what they're doing. If you're sorting emails, it's much more valuable for you to like look over the shoulders of your coworkers. And quickly just if you're wondering what your coworkers are thinking about you when you are there at your first day, at your first job, we probably forgot that you were starting today. If it's a big company, we probably forgot that you were starting at all. We probably forgot we were hiring. Because everyone's busy with their own tasks, so it's like, oh, yeah, hello, great. Keep up, observe, and stay out of the way. You know, I'm already stressed about the things I should have had done yesterday, and now I have this new person I need to like go hi to. But if you show initiative, ask questions to learn, and just make yourself as unawkward as possible and drive the conversation with meaning and take that responsibility, then it's go ahead, kid, be under the wing. However, if someone is assigned as your mentor for your like first weeks or so, they probably or they should have time scheduled out to guide you throughout of this. And getting into some practical stuff about what it looks like when you're sitting there at your desk after your mentor has left you alone and you can finally get into work. First of all, as a game designer, you have to be designing your own pipeline. And it kind of harkens back to that fact that why I'm bringing this up is that I never saw a practical example of my teachers designing a game. So when I got into the industry and I sat behind my desk, I didn't really know what it looked like, what you're doing practically. But I had been doing that. I had homework that told me go and design a cellular automata, etc., etc. And I would be like, oh, okay. And then I would do it, but I wouldn't realize that I'm already establishing my own pipeline there. Because that's what we do. As game designers, we solve problems, and how we solve those problems is just another problem for us to solve. So we got to figure out our own ways, the things that best communicate our design. We live with a big chunk of the game in our own head, and we do not realize how little we communicate that. We think everybody knows, but they don't. Choose whatever method that best communicates your design primarily. Secondarily, choose whatever is most comfortable for you. And it could be something digital, something analog. It could be cave paintings or interpretive dancing, for all I care. As long as you're working on your own design in your own way and it gets results, do what makes you happiest. But make sure it's the quickest one as well, because you want to get things done as soon as possible. If your deadline is on Friday and it's a Monday, then it's better to get your things done on Wednesday so you can get feedback on it rather than having your design locked down on Friday because you turn it in then, and only then do you hear somebody go like, hey, what about this thing? And you go like, shit, could have fixed it. And each project has its own problems that we as game designers should be solving. So while there are like repetitive things that you can bring up from your toolbox, you're going to have to be looking at each project in its own kind of setting. And if you're working on a big corporate project, then some workplaces usually have organizations and practices and templates and all that kind of stuff that you need to be following. All right, so the nitty-gritty. Most people have a creative language, but game mechanics have to be a logical language. We work as the translators of somebody that goes out and goes like, I have this great idea for a game that's gonna do this and say this and feel like this way, and go like, dope. I can't tell a computer how to feel, but I can kind of like capture that in a little pokeball of a game mechanic, and then I need to tell a programmer how that should be coded in pure logic. So we go and translate a feeling into a logic. For example, let's say we have a composer that wants us to help him out with his opera. And it's this big tragic death scene of his hero, and he has a super huge brass section to emphasize how heroic his death is, and it's like his love is singing in the background, and there's like just piles and piles of extras on stage that are all playing as dead corpses, so we can have it right on top of there. And that's what he wants you to help you out with. And you go like, okay, let's break it down. Which brass instruments? How many? What do they play? Not like specifically note by note, what do they play? Depending on what kind of game designer you are, or in what kind of company, you might be responsible for going into something so specific as like, this is exactly the number that should be happening in this situation. And it comes down to asking these questions, like how do we convey that feeling that I've been giving the task of doing? More specifics, but how do we make sure the singing and the horns don't clash? How do we make sure they work together? Because like, yeah, you went off and you made the best brass section on your left, and then you had the best tragic death scene on your right, but they don't belong in the same opera. You need to make sure that your mechanics communicate with each other. How many actors? What do the costumes look like? How do they get into position? So on, so on. Can we afford it? Which is usually a no, so when you're gonna have to find a way to somehow do all of that, but also cheaper and faster, because we already lost the time. Going into workflows, I kind of split up the industry between corporation and indie. There is a lot in between, but to make this presentation a lot easier, that's what we're going for. If you're working in corporate, you're a very specific designer. You are a level designer, you are a gameplay mechanic designer, you are a technical designer, so on, so on. You have your area of responsibility, and they kind of want you to fulfill that responsibility in as little area as possible, because then that means you're a good, efficient cog. Working in corporate, it's a lot of gates and stakeholders to check off with. Essentially, they want to make sure that whatever you're introducing to the game doesn't kill the cash cow. If we change this mechanic and suddenly everybody hates our game and jumps over to our competitors, well, that ain't good. But it's tough to deal with, especially if you're passionate and you want to get something into that game. Just be ready to have your dreams and spirits ground down to dust before you do. Everything in corporate takes an enormous amount of time because of just how many people there are and how many gates they have to make sure that everything still earns them the money. Use a PowerPoint for whatever you're pitching, because in my experiences, if you have the best speech, the best PowerPoint, and some manner of statistics in your PowerPoint to back up your case, that's the one that wins. But ultimately, I felt, and many others, that working in corporate comes down to stagnation. After you've been doing the same thing for 5 years straight, there's not so much more you can learn. There are many other examples I could bring up, but make sure that you know when you're still gaining something from this position. Because you can do as I and go indie instead. Hey, and then you're gonna learn a lot because you're gonna be wearing a lot of hats. Depending on who you have in your team, you might be working with the UI, you might be doing the level design, you might be doing the economy, etc., etc., etc. Game design on an indie, wow, you're doing everything. So you're gonna have to learn a lot of things very quickly, fast. Your stakeholders and your gates essentially boil down to, can we afford to put it in? Because you will be in situations where you are like, I know what we need, I know how to do it, I know how long time it takes it to do it, and we all want to do it. And ultimately you're going to be like, nah, we can't do it. You have an easier flow of communication in India as well. I mean, if you are 2 people, then you only need to talk to one other person, for example, versus the giant hordes of king employees. And you have a more reactive bottleneck in working from indie. So it's easier to reprioritize to clear blockage. For example, if I am tuning a mechanic and it turns out that there's a bug in that mechanic that blocks me, it is much quicker and easier for me to turn around and tell my producer and the programmer that should be fixing that bug to like, hey, we need this done now. Versus in corporations, you gotta go through all of the hoops. No? Oops. Excuse me. Happens, right? Presentations. How much time do I have left?
You have 45, so 5 minutes.
Sorry?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right. Well, we should be doing the good parts then. Yeah, this has been taking a lot longer than I thought. Very well. We'll skip that and we'll get to just a few quick mentions. I think these are the important things that you should keep in mind, that after you've had a few years in the industry, these are frequent things that are coming up. So you're a year or two in and you've gotten over the initial scary stuff. You're finally getting paid. A lot of people keep in mind that you're passively advancing your career. Every time you wake up and you go to work, you have one more day of experience on your CV. Keep that in mind for the next slide. And keep in mind that sometimes you just lose all of that excitement of working at the place you are, and it's just a job. Some people have been asking me about like, I used to have so much passion for like making my own projects, and then I got a job and it all disappeared. And that's because that energy that you had to put into games is being channeled at work. So if you're frustrated or confused or scared that you're no longer working on that dream project after you got a job, it's kind of just, you gotta reprioritize that energy. Maybe don't put all of it at work, or like make it a weekend thing. If you want my advice, do it with friends for fun, because it's gonna become a positive feedback loop. You're gonna make them excited to be working on games, and they're gonna be making you excited to work on games. As well as take your time. We are not athletes, so we can be doing our super personal indie darling project when we're 70. We don't have to do it now. Yeah. So something that happens very often is imposter syndrome. Look it up. I mean, I don't have the time to explain it really, but it happens to all levels of people at all kinds of different positions. So you might be talking to a super senior programmer and they're like feeling like they're the dumbest person in the room, you know? It happens to everybody. Be forward with it, be transparent. Google it. Make sure you know what it is. Burnout is something that happens most professionals sooner or later. You've been on this path of like studying, looking for a job, getting a job, working. Sometime all of that is gonna catch up to you and you're gonna hit a brick wall. It can be about your work life, it can be about your personal life, it can be, you know, things in the past you haven't dealt with, but some point you're gonna hit a brick wall and you're gonna have to tell your team that you need some time off. Here in Sweden, it's called sick leave. Use it. You get paid doing it, and everyone is cool with it. And the point I wanna emphasize here is that if your team is not cool with you being burned out, don't be in a team with them. Simple as that. Take care of yourselves. But yeah, a few years in, you're gonna see the good times. The hardest part is over. Once you get your job, you're gonna see that getting another one is as easy as walking through the door. It's that first job that is the biggest step that you have to do. You're finally a professional game designer. Like I said, every day you are working as that is another day on your CV. You're advancing your career passively. You're gonna have a network of like-minded individuals, the people that you're starting to look at like, you know, if I'm running off and starting in my own studio, I probably want Lance. Yeah, I'm a great programmer. And people are thinking about you. People are coming to you to talk about game design. People want to ask you things. They want your opinions. They, more than that, want to be your friend. Yeah. Let time do its thing. Enjoy what it brings. We do not need to rush. We do not need to be 30-year-old Elon Musk professionals. We can be wise old game designers sitting under oaken trees and still churn out really cool stuff. So take this time to realize that you're just starting and you're only going to get better from here. Thank you very much.